To discuss this, we're joined in San Diego, California by former U.S. Deputy Assistant Attorney General Harry Litman. And in the French city of Rennes is Marc Porter. He is the president of Republicans Overseas France. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us on the Newsmakers. Harry, has this firing of Jeff Sessions actually created more problems for Donald Trump than leaving him in place?
Well, that's hard to say. I mean, it could blow up in his face. There's been a huge torrent of criticism of Whitaker, both as to his credentials, which are spare in the extreme, and more importantly, to his pre-existing alliance with the president. The idea is certainly to reduce the problems. The idea is certainly to install someone who will ride herd on the Mueller probe. If he's able to succeed in that goal, no, it will overall reduce the hot water he is in. But right now, that outcome is in doubt because the pushback has been ferocious.
Mark, what do you make of that? Harry says ride herd over the Mueller probe. It seems Harry's saying that specifically Sessions has been fired because there wasn't the oversight that Donald Trump wanted on the Mueller investigation.
Well, not necessarily that, but of course, Attorney General Sessions has a completely different type of personality than the president. The president needs someone now that can take care of him in terms of making sure that the Mueller investigation is done properly. They have certainly a large scope of what they're able to investigate in these things. And the point that Attorney General Sessions had recused himself because of a trap that was set during the confirmation hearings always set really badly with the president. So the idea that Attorney General Sessions during the confirmation hearings had said that he had never met with a Russian ambassador, when in fact he had simply interpreted that as by saying that he had never sat down, had a meeting with him. When it turned out some of the campaign staffers on other campaigns came forward and said that they had a photograph of him shaking the ambassador's hand. That's not exactly meeting with someone, but Sessions, who's a very honorable man, decided to step down and recuse himself in order to avoid any perceived conflict. That was seen, of course, by the president as an error.
Yeah, but Mark, sorry, hold on. Haven't you just answered your own question? You've said that Attorney General Sessions is an honorable man, and when it turned out that he had met with Russian diplomats, that surely would be reason enough to recuse him from the investigation, because it would surely make him appear not to be impartial. Are you saying that the president would prefer loyalty over impartiality? It made sense to so many people that he would recuse himself.
No, it didn't really make sense to a lot of people. And the idea that you meet with someone, in fact, that was what the line of questioning was intended to do, was to trap Jeff Sessions. Meeting with someone and meeting someone are two different things. And Sessions just simply said, well, in order to clarify the situation, he would step down and move forward. What we've seen, in fact, is the investigation has been rather abusive. It's gone after people that are completely innocent. They have destroyed people's lives. They've cost hundreds of thousands of dollars of people that had nothing to do with this. There is no Russian collusion. This is absolutely ridiculous. So, of course, Trump, at this particular time, the president would like to see this wrapped up, to see what Mueller does have in his investigation, what he has come up with, get the report out so that we can see that there's nothing there and we can move on and help the people of America, the U.S.
Harry, anything to say about that?
Yes, quite a bit. First of all, rule number one with Mueller is you know, Mark has no basis for making that claim. Everything we know that Mueller has alleged so far has proven to be 100% solid gold. There have been conviction after conviction after conviction of higher-up folks. The more important point, I do think both you and Mark answered it. Excuse me, Mr. Porter, I'll be done in a moment. Did answer it. It's exactly as you say, and it's quite evident. Mark says he needs someone to take care of the investigation. You say, does he value loyalty over impartiality? It's quite evident that he does. And remember, he is a criminal suspect. It's completely irregular and improper to install atop a probe somebody who is looking out for the interests of the president rather than looking out for the interests of justice. That's what is so unnerving about the move. Finally, on the recusal of Sessions. Sessions went to the professional staff in the Department of Justice. They advised him he has to recuse. There's not an attorney general who's ever served who would disregard that information until now, Matt Whitaker. He's made it clear that even if the professional staff tells him he must recuse, he's not going to. That is mind-bending.
Okay, Marc.
What's mind-bending is the fact that Loretta Lynch and Eric Holder were also under investigation. They also didn't appear at congressional committees. So this is ridiculous to say that Jeff Sessions would be somehow different, an anomaly here, and that the president doesn't have the right to do this. He's the president of the United States. He is the boss of the Justice Department. We have these rules that we follow, and this idea that everyone is out on a witch hunt trying to find things. Every indictment that was done by Mueller had to do with something completely irrelevant, completely different than the original investigation. There's no scope of the investigation. It's completely run amok. It's a witch hunt.
Okay, let's move on to the new man in charge, Jeff Whitaker.
So that's
Harry, go on.
Go ahead, sure.
Go ahead, Harry.
Okay.
Go on.
Well, I was just going to say once again, of course, many of the indictments are dead center within the sights of the Russian investigation, and the focus right now has been quite properly on obstruction. Yes, he's the president. Yes, he's the head of the Department of Justice. So was Richard Nixon. So, in fact, was Bill Clinton when I was in the Department of Justice. It's 100% clear that when the president occupies those dual roles, he cannot reach out and try to influence things. Imagine if Bill Clinton had installed Hillary Clinton as Attorney General under the pretext, well, I have a right to have my person there. It's just not how the justice system can work in a democracy.
Okay, let's please now look at the new man in charge, Matthew Whitaker. Marc, should he recuse himself? He has been speaking in public on American television against the Russian investigation before he became Attorney General, acting Attorney General. He's even talked about specific points that he would employ to end the investigation. That seems to be obstruction of justice and certainly some kind of pre-based opinion before getting the job, and how that might affect the oversight of the Mueller investigation.
There's no obstruction of justice. This is a smokescreen that the Democrats have been trying to use for a long time. They certainly weren't screaming that around Loretta Lynch when she met with President Clinton on that airplane out on that tarmac. All of a sudden, the rules change here. With the Justice Department, the president is the boss of the Justice Department. There is no obstruction. That's just a legal maneuver in order to help Democrats have a founding here. This idea that Eric Holder was under investigation for gun running across the Mexican border, these things should still be investigated, and we're wasting our time with something that never happened. Russian collusion was set up by the DNC, the Democratic National Convention Committee. They were out with the Michael Steele dossier trying to create this ridiculous story that everyone is saying is not true. Mueller's got to write up his report. Let's see what's in there, because no one knows at this point, and move on so that we can help the American people.
Okay, let's wait for the denouement, the end game of the Mueller investigation before we make statements about whether there's been collusion or not. We understand that the two sides have different opinions. Harry, let me ask you this. What are the legal means that Matthew Whitaker may have?
May I just respond to what Marc just said?
Sure.
Okay. I just wanted to say, Marc, I think you've expressed views quite like those of Matt Whitaker. Do you feel that if you were in charge of the investigation, there would be some basis for thinking maybe you're not impartial? That's the issue with recusal. If you have someone who has these very strong views, as you do, as Matt Whitaker does, the public obviously would have basis for believing that you've already prejudged the matter. That's what we're talking about. Same standard for anybody, Loretta Lynch, Jeff Sessions, and now Matt Whitaker.
That's a ridiculous premise to put forward.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
This is a ridiculous premise to put forward. This idea that the Justice Department is in charge of the investigation. The president is the head of the Justice Department. He can put in who he likes. The Mueller investigation is an independent special counsel. This is very clear. They have an unlimited budget. They have unlimited staff. So they've had over a year and a half, and so far they haven't come forward with anything except indictments that have nothing to do with their original mandate.
Mark, do you think that Mueller's going to be fired before the investigation is complete?
You're simply wrong as a matter of law. If you were right, Richard Nixon would not have had to resign.
Okay, Mark.
It's just mistaken, Mark, in your legal analysis.
Okay, again, you're not going to agree on that point. What about the possibility, Mark, what about the possibility of Mueller being fired before his investigation is complete? Do you think it's possible?
I don't know what's possible, but I do know that we are waiting for the report to come out. I know that Mueller has said that he's going to put out a report, and we're waiting to see what's in it.
Apparently, he's writing it right now. Harry, what are the legal means available to Matthew Whitaker to hamper the Mueller investigation if he wanted to do that? What's within his power?
Sure. I mean, he has extensive power now as the supervisor. He controls, although he's still bound by law and regulations, so he controls budget. He controls any expansion of the jurisdiction. He can actually second-guess a particular investigative move by Mueller, although it has to be for very strong reason, and he has to give heavy deference to special counsel. And then finally, on this report that Mark mentions, he actually would have great authority to decide what happens to it, how widely it's disseminated. And remember, Team Trump, and he is part of Team Trump, that's why he's there now, has already said they would like not to see it made public. So he would have a lot of authority there. And in all of these points, of course, it would be impossible for wherever you are on this question, you have to recognize it's in the public interest to have a full investigation that people can have confidence in. And if you have somebody astride it who's able to actually suppress it, people are just not going to feel that way. It's just self-evident.
Mark?
How do you know what people are going to feel? This is ridiculous. This idea that Mueller's part of Team Trump, but he can't fire him. You're playing both sides of the cards here. This is a typical Democratic strategy that doesn't work, and the people know.
No. I'm sorry. Mueller's not part of Team Trump. Whitaker's part of Team Trump. That's why he's there. He's the eyes and ears, in his own words, of the president here.
Okay, you know what?
And remember, the president is a criminal suspect.
Okay, just in the last few minutes, can I just widen it a little bit further? Mark, there are accusations that Donald Trump has been politicizing the application of law in the United States to suit his own purposes. You're already shaking your head, but let me just take you back to just a couple of weeks ago, okay? Because Newt Gingrich was doing a live interview.
I'm shaking my head.
Right, okay. Newt Gingrich was doing a live interview. He was asked by the interviewer, what will happen if Congress subpoenas Donald Trump to show his tax returns? I want to get this quote right because this was Gingrich's response. He said, then they'll be trapped into appealing to the Supreme Court and we'll see whether or not the Kavanaugh fight was worth it. That seems to be Newt Gingrich saying that Kavanaugh was nominated to the Supreme Court by the President of the United States to serve and protect Donald Trump's interests.
No, what we're trying to do is to get to the truth here. And we know that the whole Russia investigation began.
This is a different question now. Mark, seriously, a different question. This is about Donald Trump, the accusation that he's politicizing the application of American law. That one quote from Newt Gingrich was like a bombshell in the United States, wasn't it? Because if he's saying that if Trump is subpoenaed to show his tax returns, we'll see if the fight for Kavanaugh to be nominated to the Supreme Court was worth it, that's an incredible statement.
I haven't talked to Newt recently, and I haven't heard the quote, so I don't know in what context he's talking about. So that's one statement. I would like to talk to Newt before I make a comment on that. Because simply the idea that if this goes to the Supreme Court over the president's tax returns, this is another witch hunt, just like the Russia investigation.
Okay, Harry, I think it's the last word to you. How do you just see the whole way Trump is protecting himself against the various investigations? We haven't even come to what's happened in the Southern District of New York and the findings from the New York Times about the hush money being paid to a male film actress. all of that stuff. But Trump is under investigation for so many different things. He's under pressure, but he's surviving. How do you see this playing out?
Yeah, I mean, it is really wide-ranging, and among his partisans, like Marc, you hear on the one hand, we want the truth out. On the other, this is all witch hunt. There's nothing there, and a sense of having prejudged it. It will be really critical whether Whitaker, please, Mr. Porter, it'll be really critical whether or not Whitaker stays in. But, you know, Bob Mueller is in a very interesting position. On the one hand, he is a good soldier. He respects chain of command. On the other, his whole life has been about rule of law and accountability and public corruption. All the values he spent his life for are obviously endangered by this most dangerous and really abusive president probably in our history, and whether he will fight or just salute if there is, in fact, some kind of attempt to suppress his investigation is hard to predict in advance. But certainly here, it doesn't sound like it in France, but certainly here, everyone is watching and very worried because Trump has shown himself again and again to really think basically only about Trump.
Marc, do you want to reply to that?
Well, clearly that's a very political statement, this idea that Trump is the worst president ever, that everything is horrible because Trump is president. When our economy is growing, the people have faith in him, as we saw in the midterm elections. This is quite ridiculous to say this. Only people within the Beltway are talking about these sorts of things. We will move on. The Republic is stronger than this. Harry clearly is a partisan out there working for the Democratic Party. I can congratulate him on that. The midterms weren't that bad for him. But this whole idea is there was no Russian collusion. We know that innocent people have been chased down and hunted down like witches, and this is what I'm referring to. So this idea of going after innocent people to suppress a political party. Please, Harry, you had your turn. Now, the idea here is
name one innocent person. You're right.
Are you kidding? I have a whole list of them. Do you know how many people have been chased after, had to pay their own legal bills after all of the Mueller investigation is done with an unlimited budget, with no real mandate? They can go after anyone they want. And until now, none of the indictments have had anything to do with this supposedly Russia investigation.
Name one innocent person.
J.B. Gordon, number one. And I've got a whole list. I just did. I've got a whole list of them. So provoking into this is ridiculous. You know that you're being partisan. You know that you're out there trying to twist and do anything possible to remove the president when the people have clearly spoken. So, Harry, I'm really sorry. Perhaps in a year or so, we can have a conversation after the report comes out, and then we'll see the people have moved on. America is a strong republic. The people deserve better than this.
Gentlemen, thank you very much indeed. Marc and Harry, really appreciate it.
We can definitely agree there. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Marc.